John Miller stared at the photo in his hand. It showed two boys, arms around each other's shoulders, standing in front of an old oak tree. He smiled and tucked it back into the pocket of his uniform. Looking at that old picture again? Ryan Miller floated into the room, pushing himself along the handrails of the UES Vanguard with practiced ease. John nodded. Mom sent it in her last message. Remember that summer at Grandpa's farm? How could I forget? You pushed me into the pond and I got covered in mud. Ryan laughed and settled into the seat beside his brother. The two men looked remarkably alike, both with brown hair and the same strong jaw. Ryan was 3 years younger but slightly taller. They had followed each other into the Earth Defense Fleet, just as they had followed each other everywhere since childhood. Captain wants us on the bridge in 10 minutes, Ryan said. We're about to enter Zeraxian space. John's face grew serious. Think this mission will work? It has to. Earth Command says the Zeraxians have taken over 12 more planets in the past year. If someone doesn't stop them soon, they'll reach the human colonies next. The brothers made their way through the curved hallways of the ship. Crew members nodded respectfully as they passed. John was the ship's tactical officer, while Ryan served as communications specialist. Both were key members of this diplomatic mission. On the bridge, Captain Lisa Wright stood reviewing holographic maps of Zeraxian territory. Officers Miller, she acknowledged them. We're approaching the border. All reports indicate the Zeraxian delegation will meet us at these coordinates. She pointed to a spot on the map. Any word from our other ships? John asked. The UES Horizon and UES Defender are holding position just inside our territory. We go in alone, as agreed. Diplomatic protocols. John felt uneasy. The Zeraxian Empire had a reputation for aggression. In just 20 years, they had expanded from one solar system to controlling an area larger than the entire human alliance. Their technology was said to be advanced, their warriors fierce, and without mercy. Communications check, Ryan said, settling at his station. All systems functioning. We're broadcasting on all diplomatic frequencies that we come in peace. The view screen showed space ahead of them. A shimmer appeared as they crossed the border into Zeraxian territory. I still don't understand why they agreed to this meeting, John said quietly to his brother. They've never shown interest in diplomacy before. Ryan shrugged. Maybe even they recognize that endless war isn't sustainable. Or maybe they finally met someone they can't easily defeat. I hope you're right. 3 hours later, the UES Vanguard arrived at the meeting point. The crew waited tensely until 3 Zeraxian ships appeared on sensors. They're hailing us, Ryan announced. On screen, Captain Wright ordered. The view screen flickered and revealed a Zeraxian official. Its skin was gray with hints of purple, stretched tight over a narrow face. Multiple yellow eyes blinked independently of each other. Greetings, humans, the Zeraxian said in flawless English. I am Sub-Commander Krell. The Emperor welcomes you to our territory. Thank you, Sub-Commander, Captain Wright replied. We come seeking peaceful resolution to our territorial disputes. Of course. Please follow our escort to the diplomatic station. The Emperor himself wishes to meet with your delegation. When the transmission ended, whispers broke out across the bridge. The Emperor. Ryan raised his eyebrows. That's unexpected. Usually they just send ministers. John looked out at the Zeraxian ships. Something felt wrong. Captain, request permission to run another weapons check. Denied, Officer Miller. We don't want to appear hostile. We're here under diplomatic protection. As the human ship followed the Zeraxian escort deeper into their territory, John placed his hand on his brother's shoulder. Stay alert, Ryan. I've got a bad feeling about this. Ryan nodded, his eyes focused on his controls. Always do, big brother. Always do. The UES Vanguard moved forward, Earth's flag and diplomatic signals clearly visible on its hull. The fate of human-Zeraxian relations, possibly the fate of many worlds, rested on the success of this mission. The diplomatic station hung in space like a giant metal spider. 6 docking arms extended from a central hub, each one big enough to hold a battleship. The UES Vanguard approached slowly, guided by Xeraxian traffic control. Docking complete, Ryan announced from his station. Environmental systems matched. Captain Wright stood and straightened her uniform. John, Ryan, you're with me. Lieutenant Garcia has command of the bridge. The diplomatic team gathered at the airlock. The captain, the Miller brothers, and 2 security officers. All wore formal Earth Defense Fleet uniforms with no weapons as required by diplomatic protocol. Remember, Captain Wright said quietly, we represent all of humanity today. The airlock hissed open. 3 Xeraxians waited on the other side, their tall, thin bodies covered in ornate armor. The one in the center stepped forward. I am Chief, Diplomat Zax. Welcome to Imperial Station 7. The Emperor awaits you in the Grand Hall. The humans followed the Xeraxians through long, curved hallways. John noticed there were far more armed guards than seemed necessary for a peace meeting. He caught Ryan's eye and his brother nodded slightly. He had noticed too. The Grand Hall was enormous, with ceilings that stretched at least 50 feet high. Xeraxian flags hung from the walls, each showing the Imperial symbol, a star being crushed by a gray fist. At the far end of the hall, on a raised platform, sat Emperor Vexkar. He was larger than other Xeraxians with darker skin and 6 eyes instead of the usual 4. His throne appeared to be made from the metals of conquered worlds, melted and formed together. Humans, the Emperor spoke, his voice echoing through the hall. You have traveled far to meet me. Captain Wright stepped forward and bowed slightly. Emperor Vexkar, we bring greetings from Earth and the Human Alliance. We seek peaceful resolution to our territorial disputes. The Emperor made a sound that might have been a laugh. Peace? Your species speaks of peace only when you fear war. We don't fear war, Captain Wright replied calmly. We simply prefer to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Surely the great Xeraxian Empire feels the same. The Emperor leaned forward. Do you know how many species have stood before me as you do now? 27. Do you know how many still exist as independent peoples? None. John tensed. He glanced toward the exits and saw that more guards had entered, blocking the ways out. Emperor. Ryan stepped forward. Surely your empire has grown large, enough that managing it requires all your resources. Continued expansion will only stretch. Silence, the Emperor roared. You dare to suggest limits to the Xeraxian Empire? The Emperor raised his hand and the guards around the room raised their weapons. Captain, John whispered urgently, we need to get out of here. But it was too late. The Emperor stood from his throne. Let this be a lesson to all humans. The Xeraxian Empire does not negotiate. We conquer. Run! Captain Wright yelled as the first energy blasts hit the floor around them. Chaos erupted. The security officers pushed Captain Wright toward one of the side exits while John and Ryan dove behind a pillar. This way. Ryan pointed to a service door. They sprinted across the hall as energy blasts scorched the walls around them. They reached a corridor that led toward the docking bays. Alarms blared throughout the station. We need to warn Earth, John said as they ran. They turned a corner and found themselves face to face with 5 Xeraxian soldiers. Before they could retreat, the soldiers fired. Ryan shoved John through a side door, taking a blast to his shoulder in the process. They tumbled into what looked like a maintenance room. Ryan! John caught his brother as he fell. Get to the shuttle bay, Ryan gasped, clutching his wounded shoulder. I'll hold them off. I'm not leaving you. Ryan pushed a tool rack against the door. One of us has to make it back to warn Earth. You know I'm right. The door shuddered as the Xeraxians began to break through. Go, John. Now. With a last desperate look at his brother, John slipped through the far door. He heard the maintenance room door crash open behind him, followed by the sound of Ryan's service pistol, the small defensive weapon they'd been allowed to keep. John ran through the station's back corridors, the sound of fighting growing distant. He reached a small observation window and looked out just in time to see the UES Vanguard erupt in flames as Xeraxian weapons tore through it. His heart turned to ice. There would be no rescue, no reinforcements, and somewhere behind him, his Brother faced the enemy alone. John hid in the shadows of a maintenance tunnel as Xeraxian soldiers rushed past. His uniform was torn and stained with blood, some his, most Ryan's. The memory of his brother pushing him to safety played over and over in his mind. A security camera swiveled in his direction. John froze, then relaxed as it moved away. The Xeraxians were looking for a human in Earth Defense Fleet uniform. He needed to change that. In a storage closet, John found worker coveralls. He quickly changed, stuffing his uniform into a waist chute. As he worked, he touched the pocket where he kept the photo of him and Ryan as boys. It was still there. "I'll make them pay," he whispered. John studied a station map on the wall. The main shuttle bays would be heavily guarded, but there was a small emergency craft dock on the lower level. If he could reach it, he might escape. He moved carefully through the station, passing himself off as a maintenance worker. Twice he had to duck into side passages as patrols went by. He overheard snippets of conversation. Humans all captured or killed. Prepare broadcast to their homeworld. Emperor wants public executions. John's blood ran cold. Ryan might still be alive, but for how long? He reached a security checkpoint that blocked his path to the lower levels. 2 guards stood, at attention, checking everyone who passed. John eyed an air duct above him, then spotted a better option. A group of workers was bringing in cleaning equipment. John casually fell in with them, keeping his head down. The guards waved the group, through without checking each person. Once past, John slipped away down a side corridor. The emergency shuttle bay was small and dimly lit. A single craft sat on the launch pad, an older model escape pod designed for station evacuations. John hurried inside and began checking systems. The pod had minimal navigation capabilities and enough life support for perhaps a week. It would have to do. As John prepared for launch, alarms sounded throughout the station. They had discovered he was missing. Time was running out. He activated the launch sequence just as the bay doors opened and Xeraxian soldiers poured in. Energy blast hit the pod as it shot out into space. The pod shuddered and warning lights flashed. One engine was damaged. John worked frantically at the controls, trying to plot a course that would take him to human space. The station grew smaller behind him, but soon a Xeraxian patrol ship appeared on his sensors. They were coming after him. John diverted all power to the remaining engine and headed for a nearby asteroid field. If he could reach it, he might be able to hide until the patrol gave up. The Xeraxian ship was faster, gaining quickly. A warning siren blared as it locked weapons. The first blast missed, but the second clipped his pod, sending it spinning. John fought with the controls, eventually stabilizing his course. The asteroid field was just ahead. He plunged into the dense cluster of rocks, weaving between them as best he could with the damaged controls. The Xeraxian ship followed, but had to slow down to navigate the field. John spotted a particularly large asteroid with a deep crater. He maneuvered into it and cut power. In the darkness, he waited, hardly daring to breathe. The Xeraxian ship passed by, then circled back, scanning. After what seemed like hours, it finally moved away, continuing its search elsewhere. John allowed himself a moment of relief before checking the pod systems. Life support was failing. Navigation was barely functional. Communication was completely dead. He plotted the best course he could toward human space and engaged the engine at low power. It would be a long journey, with no guarantee of rescue. The pod limped away from the asteroid field. John took out the photo of him and Ryan. In the dim emergency lighting, the 2 smiling boys looked back at him. "They'll pay for what they did," John said softly. "I don't know how yet, but I swear they'll pay." He tucked the photo away and turned his attention to the stars ahead. Somewhere out there was Earth, and he had to reach it with his warning. The guy. Xeraxians were coming, and humanity needed to prepare. 3 weeks later, John sat in a hospital bed at Earth Defense Fleet headquarters. His body had healed, but his mind had not. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ryan. The doctors called it survivor's guilt. John called it fuel. Admiral Frank Peterson stood at the foot of the bed. Officer Miller, I understand your feelings, but we must approach this situation carefully. John looked up sharply. Carefully? They killed my brother. They destroyed our ship. They murdered our diplomatic team. And we will respond, the Admiral said. But the Xeraxian Empire controls over 50 star systems. We can't just charge in without a plan. What's your plan then? More diplomacy? The Admiral sighed. We're gathering our fleet, preparing defensive positions around our colonies. In 3 months, we'll have enough ships to... 3 months? John stood up despite the pain in his leg. The Xeraxians won't wait 3 months. They'll see our hesitation as weakness. Officer Miller, you need to rest. You've been through a traumatic... I need to do something, John interrupted. Ryan died so I could warn Earth, not so we could sit around and talk. After the Admiral left, John pulled out a small computer tablet. He had spent his recovery time studying Xeraxian technology and tactics. Everything pointed to one conclusion. Their empire was too big, too powerful for a direct military confrontation. But empires had weaknesses. John just needed to find them. He limped to the window and looked out at the Earth Defense Fleet training yards. In the distance, he could see a sleek black ship unlike the others. The UES Phantom, an experimental stealth vessel equipped with the latest technology. That night, John slipped out of the hospital. His security clearance still worked, allowing him access to the military complex. As he approached the ship, a voice called out from the shadows. I thought you might try something like this. John turned to see Samantha Reeves step into the light. She was tall with short blonde hair and the sharp eyes of an intelligence officer. She had also been Ryan's fiancée. Sam, John said cautiously, are you here to stop me? She shook her head. I'm here to go with you. She held up a security badge. I have the launch codes, you have the motivation. We both loved Ryan. John studied her face. The military will call this treason. I don't care what they call it. The Xeraxians killed the man I was going to marry. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned with the same fire that John felt. What's your plan? We can't beat them in a straight fight, John said, but we might not have to. Every empire has a weakness. They boarded the Phantom together. The ship's systems came to life. As Samantha entered her codes, Welcome aboard UES Phantom, a computerized voice said. How may I assist you? This is the new AI system, Samantha explained. Most advanced in the fleet. We need one more person, John said as he studied the ship's specs. Someone who understands computer systems better than anyone else. You mean Daniel Hayes, Samantha said. John nodded. Daniel was a legend in Earth's intelligence community, a brilliant programmer who had created some of the most sophisticated computer viruses ever known. He had retired to a remote cabin in the mountains after a classified mission went wrong. Can you find him? Samantha was already at the navigation console. I know where he is, but he won't be easy to convince. Tell him it's about taking down the Xeraxian Empire. The whole empire? Samantha raised an eyebrow. That's ambitious. John looked down at the photo of him and Ryan. They think humans are weak. They think we'll respond to their attack with caution and diplomacy. The Phantom's engines hummed to life. They're about to learn how wrong they are, John said as the ship rose into the night sky. Because they didn't just kill a soldier or a diplomat. They killed my brother. Earth grew smaller below them as they accelerated away. 3 humans against an empire that spanned 50 worlds. The odds were impossible, but the Xeraxians had made one critical mistake. They had made it personal. The cabin sat deep in the woods, far from any city or town. No roads led to it, only a narrow path that wound through tall trees. John and Samantha approached cautiously. Daniel Hayes lives here? John asked, eyeing the simple wooden structure. Samantha nodded. After what happened on Europa Station, he wanted to disappear. They were 10 feet from the door when a voice called out from speakers hidden in the trees. That's far enough. State your business or leave. Samantha stepped forward. Daniel, it's Samantha Reeves. We need to talk. Silence followed, then the cabin door slowly opened. Daniel Hayes stood in the doorway, a thin man with wild gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He wore simple clothes and a permanent frown. "Sam," he acknowledged, then looked at John. "And you must be Ryan's brother. News travels even, out here." He gestured for them to enter. "Come in, but make it quick. I don't do visitors anymore." Inside, the cabin was surprisingly modern. Computer screens covered one wall, showing data streams John couldn't understand. The rest of the space was minimal. A bed, a small kitchen, a table covered in electronic parts. "I know why you're here," Daniel said as he sat at his workstation. "You want revenge on the Zeraxians." "Not just revenge," John replied. "Justice and protection for Earth." Daniel laughed without humor. "The Zeraxian Empire has conquered 27 species. What makes you think 3 humans in a stolen ship can stop them?" Samantha placed a data chip on the table. "Because we have this, the complete technical specifications of the Zeraxian Central Network." Daniel's eyebrows rose. "Where did you get that?" "I worked in intelligence before joining the diplomatic mission," Samantha explained. "This was part of our briefing package." Daniel inserted the chip into his system. His eyes moved rapidly as he scanned the information. "This is interesting. Very interesting." John stepped closer. "What do you see?" "The Zeraxians are technologically advanced, but they're also arrogant. Their entire empire runs on a single network architecture. Everything is connected: weapons, communication, life support, even their food production." "Is that a weakness?" Samantha asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "It could be, with the right virus introduced at the right points." He looked up at them. "What exactly are you planning?" "Total system failure," John said. "We want to hit them so hard they can't recover." "That would kill millions," Daniel pointed out. "We can target military and government systems," Samantha added quickly. "Spare civilian infrastructure where possible." Daniel turned back to the screens. "I might have something that could work. I've been developing a worm that can adapt to any system it encounters. It learns and evolves. I called it Nemesis." "Will you help us?" John asked. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "What the Zeraxians did was wrong. But what you're planning..." He sighed. "Let me show you something." He pulled up an image on one of his screens. It showed a beautiful city with crystal towers now in ruins. Alien bodies littered the streets. This was Proxima IV after the Zeraxians conquered it. They killed everyone who resisted and enslaved the rest. More images appeared. Planets stripped of resources, species forced into labor camps. "This is what happens to everyone who crosses their path." John looked at the images, his resolve hardening. "This is why we need to stop them, before they reach Earth." Daniel turned off the screens. "I'll help you, but we do this my way. Precise. Careful. We hit their military and government, not their civilians." "Agreed," John said. "What's your plan?" Samantha asked. Daniel smiled for the first time. "We'll need to infiltrate 3 key nodes in their network: their defense hub at Zarek Prime, their communication center on Velar, and their government complex on the homeworld." "That's impossible," Samantha said. "Those are the most heavily guarded locations in their empire." "Not if you have a stealth ship and the best hacker in the galaxy," Daniel replied, gathering equipment. "When do we start?" John looked at Samantha, then back to Daniel. "Now, the Phantom is ready, and I've waited long enough." As they left the cabin, Daniel glanced back at his simple home. "I might never see this place again, you know." "If we succeed," John said, "you'll be too busy accepting medals to miss it." Daniel laughed. "And if we fail, then none of us will live long enough to regret anything." The UES Phantom slipped through Zeraxian space like a ghost. Its stealth technology made it invisible to sensors, allowing John, Samantha, and Daniel to reach their first target undetected. "Zarek Prime Defense Hub coming into view," Samantha said from the pilot's seat. John looked at the massive space station on the view screen. Hundreds of Zeraxian warships surrounded it, protecting the central command for their entire defense network. How do we get in? John asked. Daniel pointed to a small maintenance dock. Supply ships dock there. They're not as heavily guarded. The Phantom matched speed with a supply vessel and attached to its hull. When the larger ship docked with the station, they were brought inside without triggering any alarms. Stay in contact, John told Samantha as he and Daniel prepared to leave the ship. If anything goes wrong, take the Phantom and run. Samantha handed them each a small device. Plant these on any computer terminal. They'll upload Daniel's virus and then destroy themselves. John and Daniel moved through the station wearing stolen Xeraxian worker uniforms. They kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact with the soldiers that passed them. The main server room should be on level 4, Daniel whispered, checking a small scanner hidden in his palm. They entered a lift and Daniel pressed the button for level 4. Just as the doors were closing, a Xeraxian officer stepped in. John, tensed, ready to fight. The officer barely glanced at them. The lift stopped at level 4 and they exited quickly. The officer continued upward. That was close, Daniel muttered. The server room was guarded by 2 soldiers. John pointed to a panel on the wall. Daniel nodded, understanding the plan. Daniel approached the panel and began working on it as if performing maintenance. Moments later, alarms blared in a distant part of the station. Security breach in Sector 7, announced a computerized voice. The guards looked at each other, then one spoke into his communicator. After a brief exchange, both hurried off toward the disturbance. We have 5 minutes, maybe less, Daniel said as they entered the server room. The room was filled with tall black machines, lights blinking on their surfaces. Daniel quickly found the central terminal and attached Samantha's device. Nemesis is uploading, he said, watching the screen. It's accessing their defense protocols. On the screen, lines of code flashed by too fast to read. Then a single message appeared. Virus deployed. That's it? John asked. Daniel smiled. That's it. Right now, Nemesis is spreading through their entire defense network. Within hours, every Xeraxian weapon system will be infected. They returned to the Phantom without incident. As they detached from the supply ship and moved away from the station, John asked, "What exactly will the virus do?" "Nothing yet," Daniel explained. "It's just positioning itself. When we activate it from the final location, it will shut down their weapons, disable their shields, and scramble their targeting systems. 1 down, 2 to go," Samantha said as she set course for their next target. The communication center on Valar. The journey took 7 hours. Valar was a small moon orbiting a gas giant. Its surface was covered with massive antenna arrays that managed all communication throughout the Xeraxian Empire. "This one will be harder," Daniel warned. "There's no easy way in." John studied the layout on the screen. There, he pointed to a small landing pad. Maintenance crews use that to access the antenna systems. "It's exposed," Samantha objected. "We'll be seen." "Not if we time it right," John said. "Look at the rotation of the moon. That pad is in darkness for 20 minutes during each cycle. We land, plant the virus, and leave before the sun hits us." The plan worked. Daniel connected to a maintenance terminal outside the main facility and uploaded Nemesis into the communication system. 2 down, he said as they returned to the Phantom. Now for the hard part. The final target was the government complex on the Xeraxian homeworld, the center of their empire, the place where their emperor would be. "We should rest before attempting it," Samantha suggested. "We've been going for almost 10 hours straight." John shook his head. "No, we keep moving. The longer we wait, the greater the chance they'll detect what we've done." He looked at the photo of Ryan one more time, then tucked it away. "Set course for the Xeraxian homeworld. It's time to finish this." The Xeraxian homeworld glowed blue-green in the view screen. Massive cities covered its surface, connected by transportation lines that shimmered like silver threads. Orbital defense platforms formed a protective ring around the planet. "There's no way to sneak past those," Samantha said, pointing to the platforms. Daniel studied his screens. "We don't need to. Nemesis is already in their defense network, remember? I can temporarily blind the sensors on one of those platforms." "For how long?" John asked. "Maybe 5 minutes. It's risky, John nodded. Do it. Daniel's fingers flew over his console. Platform 7 is now experiencing technical difficulties. The Phantom shot forward, slipping through the gap in the defense network. They entered the atmosphere, clouds rushing past them as they descended toward the capital city. The government complex is that large structure in the center, Daniel said. The biggest building is the Imperial Palace. Can we land there? John asked. Samantha shook her head. Too many guards. But there's a maintenance landing pad on the adjacent building. We can land there and cross over. The Phantom touched down silently. John checked his weapon, a small energy pistol. Remember the plan? We get to the central network hub, plant the virus, then get out before it activates. They moved quickly across the roof and entered the adjacent building through a service door. Inside, they followed Daniel's directions through service corridors, avoiding the main hallways. Almost there, Daniel whispered as they approached a heavily secured door. The network hub is through here. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the complex. They've detected us, Samantha said. No, Daniel replied, checking his scanner. It's not us. Something's happening in the Imperial Palace. The door in front of them slid open. 4 Xeraxian soldiers rushed out, not even noticing the humans. Pressed against the wall, they were running toward the palace. This is our chance, John said. They slipped through the door before it closed. The network hub was a large room filled with glowing terminals. At its center stood a massive crystal structure pulsing with light. That's it, Daniel said in awe. The central node of the entire Xeraxian Empire. Every bit of data passes through this. He approached a terminal and attached the final device. The screen lit up with lines of code. Nemesis is connected to all 3 targets now, he said. When I activate it, the entire Empire will crash. John looked at the crystal. Do it. Daniel hesitated. Once I start this, there's no going back. Millions of Xeraxians will die if their life support systems fail. We programmed it to spare civilian systems, Samantha reminded him. We tried, but it's all connected. There will be collateral damage. John thought of Ryan, of the diplomatic team, of the 27 species the Xeraxians had conquered and enslaved. They made their choice when they decided might makes right, he said. Do it. Daniel pressed the final command. The crystal structure began to pulse faster, changing from blue to red. It's done, Daniel said. Nemesis is activated across all systems. We have maybe 10 minutes to get back to the ship before chaos erupts. As they turned to leave, the door opened. Emperor Vexikar himself stood there, surrounded by his royal guard. His 6 eyes narrowed as he recognized John. The human from the diplomatic mission, he hissed. I should have made sure you were dead. You killed my brother, John said, raising his weapon. You destroyed our ship. You murdered our diplomatic team. The Emperor laughed. And what have you done in return? Planted a virus? Our technicians will purge it within the hour. Daniel smiled. No, they won't. Nemesis isn't just a virus. It's evolving every second, spreading through your systems faster than anyone can track it. As if on cue, the lights flickered. An explosion sounded in the distance. The Emperor's communicator buzzed with panicked voices. What is happening? The Emperor demanded. Your empire is falling, John answered. And you get to watch it happen. The Imperial Palace shook as explosions echoed through the capital city. Through the large windows, John could see Xeraxian ships falling from the sky, their engines dead, their weapons silent. What have you done? Emperor Vexikar roared. His soldiers, raising their weapons. Before they could fire, the lights went out completely. Emergency lighting flickered on, bathing everyone in red. The soldiers' weapons suddenly powered down, the energy indicators fading to black. Your weapons are useless now, Daniel said. Nemesis has disabled them all. More explosions rocked the building. The Emperor's communicator buzzed constantly with desperate calls from across his empire. Emperor, defense systems are down. Communication networks failing. Orbital platforms falling. Life support critical in sectors 3 through 7. John stepped forward. This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. Humans came to you in peace. You chose war. The Emperor lunged at John, his clawed hand slashing through the air. John dodged and Samantha fired her weapon, still functioning because it wasn't connected to the Xeraxian network. The Emperor fell back, clutching his wounded shoulder. "We need to go, now," Daniel shouted as part of the ceiling collapsed nearby. They ran, leaving the Emperor and his guards trapped as security doors malfunctioned around them. Through corridors filled with panicked Xeraxians, they made their way back to the roof. The city was in chaos. Power was failing everywhere. Xeraxian ships crashed into buildings as their control systems went haywire. The defense platforms in orbit were falling, burning through the atmosphere like giant meteors. The three humans reached the Phantom and took off, narrowly avoiding a collapsing tower. As they climbed through the atmosphere, they watched the Xeraxian homeworld descend into darkness. "It's not just here," Daniel said, checking his screens. "Reports are coming in from across Xeraxian space. Their entire empire is collapsing. Military, bases, colonies, outposts, all of them." "What about the civilian systems?" Samantha asked. "Did we protect them?" Daniel nodded. "Mostly. Nemesis prioritized critical life support over military targets. There will be casualties, but nothing compared to what they've done to others." They watched as the planets of the Xeraxian Empire disappeared behind them. In just 11 hours since entering their space, they had accomplished what no other species had ever done. They had brought down an empire that had stood for centuries. 6 months later, John stood alone on a hillside on Earth. A simple stone marker bore Ryan's name, though his body had never been recovered. John placed a small flower on the stone. "It's done, Ryan," he said quietly. "The Xeraxians are finished. Their empire is gone. The worlds they conquered are free again." Footsteps approached from behind. Samantha and Daniel joined him at the marker. They stood in silence for a moment, remembering. "The last of the refugee ships arrived yesterday," Samantha said eventually. "Species we didn't even know existed, freed from Xeraxian labor camps." "And Admiral Peterson?" John asked. "Still unhappy that we stole his favorite ship," Daniel said with a small smile. "But it's hard to court-martial the people who saved the galaxy." On the horizon, a new city was being built. Representatives from 27 formerly conquered species now lived on Earth, working together to build a new alliance, one based on cooperation rather than conquest. "They're calling it the Galactic Confederation," Samantha said. "They want you to speak at the opening ceremony." John shook his head. "I'm done with speeches, done with fighting." "What will you do now?" Daniel asked. John looked up at the stars just beginning to appear in the evening sky. "I don't know yet, but Ryan always wanted to explore, to see new worlds. Maybe I'll do that for both of us." Later that night, John visited the prison where Emperor Vexcar was held. The once mighty ruler was now confined to a small cell, his empire reduced to these 4 walls. "Why?" the Emperor asked when he saw John. "How could 3 humans destroy everything I built?" John looked at him calmly. "Because you never understood what makes humans strong. It's not our weapons or technology. It's our connections to each other." He took out the photo of him and Ryan as boys and showed it to the Emperor. "You didn't kill a diplomat or a soldier, you killed my brother. And that was something I could never let stand." As John walked away, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Ryan was gone, but his memory had changed the galaxy forever. And somewhere among the stars, new civilizations would grow, free from the shadow of empire.